Hello and welcome to Communication Connection. I'm Terry Likes. Thank you so much for joining us. There's an old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Everyone has a smartphone, everyone can take pictures, but what does it mean to take a picture and have it turn into an art form? Well, our guest has some insight on that, Professor Wendy Roussin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for inviting me here today.
Well, we're glad to have you. You're an associate professor in the Department of Communication, an expert in digital media, multimedia, and photography.
Yes.
So we kind of want to pick your brain a little bit about this today. But first, a little bit about your background. Everyone's journey kind of meanders a bit. You started here at Mississippi State. You went to get a Master of Fine Arts at Indiana State, worked at other universities, and wound up back here at Mississippi State. Tell us some highlights from your journey beyond that.
Yeah, well, actually, meandering sounds right for the whole thing. I grew up as an Army brat, so I was always moving around. So it's kind of strange to say I've lived here in Starkville, Mississippi State for so much of this journey here. But, you know, when I originally came to Mississippi State, and I know so many people that felt the same way, it's like, 3 years, I'm out of here. But there's so much more to this community here. It's very diverse, it's very welcoming. There's a real sense of community, not just within the university faculty, in the department, the college, the university, but the town as well. It's a very welcoming place with a lot of opportunities, so many things Mississippi State can do for you. And it's a quiet place. We joke to the students, you could come here, you got an R1, you've got all these resources and nothing else to do but take advantage of them. So it's a great place to work and to be. So I've really enjoyed it.
Well, I agree, and President Keenum often talks about a family atmosphere, so I think you echo that sentiment.
Yeah.
You're now a tenured professor, have been for a while, and most people within a university or even outside of a university think of professors and doing research. Your research is really more in the creative side of things, what we call creative scholarship, dealing with photography and other forms, and yet that's kind of unique in a university setting and sometimes even a little bit more difficult to explain to the traditional researchers on a college campus.
Yeah, it is a little different to explain the traditional research, but I and any other artist you would talk to, any other visual creator, we like the term creative visual research because that ties it in a little better versus an artist. You know, we're not walking around barefoot with rumpled hair, and some of us will have paint or materials on our clothes. But we are doing research. We're doing the same things that they are. We're studying. We're looking at other examples of things in our field. We're going out. I remember one day I was photographing off Jupiter Island in Florida, and my daughter was with me that day. And I was out in the ocean, I was with my pinhole camera, and then afterwards we're floating around, and my daughter looked at me, she goes, "Mom, you are working today." I said, "Yeah, much better than an office, isn't it?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really great. I mean, but it is a lot of research. It is a lot of studying. I mean, people like joke like, "Well, I can't draw a straight line with a ruler." I'm like, well, there's a ruler. You know, we learn these tools, these elements of design. Like I talk to my students about storytelling. I'm learning visually where to put things on the canvas, on the frame, in the camera itself. How am I using these elements to come together and tell that story? So it's taking this knowledge we learn about visual communication and putting it out there. And as an artist, there's also personal expression with that. So how am I making it my art versus when I talk to my students in class, how are you telling your story to the viewer? How am I telling my story?
Well, congratulations. You've recently had several images selected for international exhibition. Tell us a little bit about this juried process and how that works, and then after that we'll take a look at some of these images and you can tell us about that.
Yeah, the work you're talking about was in the 20th annual Julia Margaret Cameron Award for Women Photographers, and that was held at Photo Nostrum in Barcelona in Spain. And Photo Nostrum has a lot of photographic opportunities. It's a very large show. It's what an honor to be in it, and I've been in it before, so to be back, it's like that level of recognition comes back to you. And so the jury process, sometimes it's one juror, sometimes it's 3 or 4 jurors, but they look at the work completely blind. So they only see the slide projected onto the screen, and they go through the work, and so maybe sometimes they might recognize the work if they've seen it, or they've juried the person before, but it's a completely blind process, so it's solely on the merit of the work itself. And my category was in abstracts this time.
Okay, well, let's take a look at one of these first images, and you can tell us a little bit about that and what the jurors were looking for, what made it unique.
Well, these series are encaustic photographs, and by the encaustic, the original here is a Polaroid 4x5 negative in a wooden pinhole camera, which is literally just a box with a hole in it. Very simple. Again, going back to the research idea, you have to think about how the light is entering this camera because you don't have a viewfinder, you don't have a meter to tell you, you're just kind of working with what you think it's going to see. And in the caustic process, it's printed on fine art paper, gessoed to a stiff board, and then you literally pour hot wax on it. And as the wax cools, you can manipulate it with tools. You can see the color that's involved in the image, so that is hand-applied color. And you can smear it in, and you just kind of work with it and bring a vibrancy back to the image. It's really, I mean, it's great to see printed, but to see it in real life and look at the wax and the depth in it is really just fantastic.
Tell us about this image. What made it stand out for you and for the judges?
I think for this image itself, totally love it. It's actually taken down in Florida, in my hometown of Vero Beach, Florida, and it's just the magnificent height of these trees and looking up into the sky. And I like the depth that you see in the image. And you can see a little bit, there's a little bit of scratching on it. So that was scratched out with, actually, believe it or not, dental tools to add some additional depth to the image.
Okay, and then let's take a look at another image that was selected as part of this international exhibition. Tell us about this one.
This one, like the first one, is taken out west, and so it's actually in the Badlands, which is a place that I've had a lot of photographic success with. In fact, I believe we'll see another example from a Badlands piece later on. But it's just going out there and finding these quiet little points of nature. It's a very self-reflective process for me. I had someone once say, "God, don't do landscape. It's so done." And you realize you got someone on a bad day that day, so jaded, but everyone has fresh eyes. So it's just coming into it, finding these quiet little moments, this interpretation moment. One thing that's different for me as a fine artist versus in communication, you're photographing people. You will never see a person in any of my shots. It's just these quiet little nature things, the things you look, kind of like the overlooked in some ways.
You have a noteworthy collection. Is there an image that is a favorite of yours over time?
Well, this is a more recent favorite. This one, it's from the Badlands series. This image here, and it's untitled. I title my work by series versus by actual names for each individual image. But if you see that beautiful split down the middle, that actually is expired Polaroid 4x5 film, which, if you don't know, is not made anymore. So had this treasure chest of it, and there's still a few more pieces of film left that I'm just holding on for. But the emulsion tore, so that literally is how it tore down the center, and it created this rift, and it allows you to look at either side of the image, kind of take it back and forth. But this, along with 4 other images, was in Creative Quarterly issue number 41, which was the 2016 Best 100. Creative Quarterly is the magazine of art and design. And so this is the best 100 artists that year, and this is the photography selection. So this one was part of a 5-page spread in a printed magazine, which is very popular. I mean, people are like, "Hey, I'm in Creative Quarterly." It's the type of thing you're telling people, you're getting excited about. And this particular image, it actually was in 5 different shows at one time. So thank you, digital media, for that, because if this was a unique, like the encaustics are pretty much unique one-offs, and some shows want just a digital copy of it. But that piece is digital. It's a 4x5 negative. I've scanned it into the computer. I've adjusted the color and fixed it and popped it up exactly the way I want it to be. But I could have it in 5 shows at one point in time because I could send 5 additional, unique, original, perfect copies. So that was kind of fun. The logistics of that is, I just framed this. What do you mean I'm framing it again?
Well, so let's break it down in very simple terms. You teach photography.
Yes.
Students probably in today's world and today's technology just think photography is point and click with a smartphone. How do you take this to the next level with your students?
Well, it's always about seeing. And the smartphone is easy. I mean, I have it. I mean, I've honestly exhibited work from the smartphone. I'm incorporating it into my current encaustic body now. But the smartphone, you can manipulate the controls a little bit, but you can't say to the smartphone, sorry, Google Images, make this sharp, sharp, sharp all the way through the plane of field for long depth of field. You can't make all these adjustments with the aperture, with the shutter. You have to talk about starting from the beginning. Like when I teach my students, I always assume they know absolutely nothing about the field. So, and if someone did tell them, it was probably wrong. But we start out with a basic camera use assignment where they learn how to move the aperture, which controls the light entering into the lens, and it controls the sharpness. We look about controlling motion, because do you want something frozen in midair? Do you want to see that blur to kind of accentuate that motion? Are you following it to pan it? Are you taking advantage of the light? Because photography literally means light writing. Without light, there is no photography. So going into the basics and teaching them that, and it's like your smartphone can't do any of this. So.
You've been teaching for many years in these classes that we've mentioned. Is there a favorite piece of advice that you like to share that you really think is memorable with your students over time?
Two things: read and communicate. I say read because 90% of the questions I'm asked, probably almost any instructor is asked, is something that is on a handout, on a video, on some sort of piece of equipment that we've handed out to these students. Read all the stuff. It's got all the guidelines. And communicate. Because the student that sits in the back of the room, that runs out, that never asks you the question, I guarantee you is not going to be one of your best students. The students that talk to you, that you develop a rapport with, they're doing the best thing. So read your handout, read your materials, communicate with your professor, and communicate with your fellow classmates. And you get the most out of the experience. Even the class you think is going to be horrible can be fun if you look that way.
In our final moments here, what's next for you? What kind of image would you like to create next?
Well, I've been working with the encaustics for a little over a year now, and I really kind of think I just want to stay with it for a while. When I started with the pinhole photography, I started with it because the computer was so much less fun than the darkroom. They say you dance in a darkroom, you sit at a computer, but you still need that computer. And I'm very good at Photoshop. I've been using it for a number of years, but I like to break out of it. And with the encaustic process, it's hands-on again. So I'm starting with the capture, I'm fixing it up in the computer, and then it's coming into a whole new level, a whole new life by getting to touch it and work with it again.
Well, Wendy Roussin has been our guest. Thank you so much for giving us some insight and for having us look at your images and giving us some insight in that.
Well, thank you, Terry. This was a wonderful opportunity, and I'm glad to be here on Communication Connection.
Well, and we're glad you've been able to join us as well. I'm Terry Likes, and we'll see you next time.